And what's going on, everybody? I am Kadarius Washington, and it is a Football Friday, which means it's time for another edition of the CW Six Pack, our weekly little pick segment where we take 6 games across the NFL slate and we pick them against the spread. And folks, this week we're actually going to be doing an 8-pack because along with our regular 6 games, we're going to be picking both of the Saturday games against the spread. And folks, we have been on an absolute heater in the 6-pack. We're just coming off of our 4th straight winning week. And for the 2nd straight week, folks, we went 5-1 in our picks against the spread. And on top of that, folks, we're already 1-0 for week 16 because we made a pick yesterday for that Rams-Seahawks thriller of a game. We took the Rams plus 1.5, and even though the Rams lost, they still covered. So we're 1-0 so far this week. We went 5-1 last week, and our season total so far is 52-45-1. But it's a new week. It's time for some new picks. Let's go ahead and get into it. So our first game on the Saturday slate, we have the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Washington Commanders. Eagles 6.5-point favorites on the road, and with a win, the Eagles will clinch the NFC East. And folks, I'm going to be honest with you. This is a very tricky game to pick. It's a primetime game against a divisional opponent on a short week. Those are the trickiest games to pick. No more Jaden Daniels for the year for Washington, as if it mattered anyway. And that Commanders defense has just been deplorably bad as they've been all year. And as you know, I just can't trust Marcus Mariota. But the Eagles, though, they're not going to have Lane Johnson or Jalen Carter in the game, which I think is significant. But I still like the Eagles in this game. And plus, last week they went up against the Raiders, which is by far the worst team in the league. And listen, is there a better remedy for a struggling team than to play the Raiders? It's like Chris Berman said on his latest Fastest 3 Minutes. Just play the Raiders and call me in the morning. And especially with the Eagles being as close as they are to winning the division and being the first team to win the NFC East in back-to-back years since 2004, I really like the Eagles in this game. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if the Commanders made this a game, but I think the Eagles are going to pull this one out. So I'm going to lay the 6.5 with the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, the next game we have the Green Bay Packers against the Chicago Bears. Packers 1.5-point favorites on the road. And if you thought that Eagles-Commanders game was a tricky pick, this one is not any easier as both of these teams have been getting destroyed by injuries. The Bears are going to be without Roma Dunze and Luther Burden, and the Green Bay Packers, Micah Parsons, is done for the year with a torn ACL, and both Christian Watson and Josh Jacobs are dealing with injuries. And on top of that, I don't know which version of these quarterbacks we're going to get in Jordan Love and Caleb Williams. I think this is going to be another tight, competitive game like it was a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's going to once again come down to the last possession of the game. But I really like the Packers to get the sweep in this game, so I'm going to lay the 1.5 with the Cheeseheads. It's a very tricky game, a very hard game, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay the points with the Packers. All right, let's get into our Sunday slate. Early afternoon window. Let's do the Minnesota Vikings against the New York Giants. Vikings 2.5-point favorites on the road. And folks, I noticed a pattern with J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy plays well against bad defenses. I mean, he's had his best 2 games as a pro in back-to-back weeks against the Commanders and the Cowboys, throwing a combined 413 yards with 5 touchdowns and 1 interception with back-to-back passer ratings over 100. And he's going up against another bad defense in the New York Giants. So in theory, J.J. McCarthy should have another good game. And on top of that, the Giants have pretty much given up on football for 2025. And they're just setting their eyes on 2026. And they have a legitimate shot at the number one pick in the draft. And what they do with that number one pick, I have no idea. But for right now, I'm going to lay the 2.5 with the Minnesota Vikings. All right, let's do the Buffalo Bills against the Cleveland Browns. Bills 10.5-point favorites on the road. And listen, if this game was in the first half of the year, I would have taken the Browns to cover with the points. The Browns had a great defense in the first half of the season, but since then, they've fallen off a cliff. They've given up at least 26 points in their last 3 games, and on top of that, they gave up 31 points in back-to-back weeks against the Titans and the Bears. Shedeur Sanders coming off of a career-worst 3-interception game last week against Chicago, and now they're going up against the Bills with the reigning MVP and Josh Allen and that Bills offense. I don't trust the Browns to make this game competitive. I'm going to lay the 10.5 with the Buffalo Bills. All right, late afternoon window. Let's do the Las Vegas Raiders against the Houston Texans. Texans 13.5-point favorites at home, and here's all you need to know for the game. Texans good, Raiders bad. The Raiders have given up on the season months ago, and don't be surprised if number 1, they get shut out again, and number 2, the Texans defense outscores the Raiders offense. I am smashing the 13.5 with the Houston Texans. All right, let's do the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Detroit Lions. Lions 7.5-point favorites at home, and should Pittsburgh win this game, Mike Tomlin will once again retain the title of never had a losing season, at least for another year. But the Steelers are in control of their own destiny for the playoffs, and their playoff fate will more than likely be decided in Week 18 against Baltimore, a game, by the way, which has Game 272 implications. Aaron Rodgers has strung together a couple of good games recently, and one of the best games of his career on last Monday night against the Dolphins. But the Steelers are once again going to be without TJ Watt, as he's still recovering from that collapsed lung. Meanwhile, the Lions boast the league's top scoring offense, averaging 30.6 points per game. And here's the thing, folks. Detroit owns a 14-1 record against the spread after a loss since mid-2022. But, folks, 7.5 points is just way too many points for my blood. I can see this game being a shootout and a good deal of points being scored between the two. I'm going to take the 7.5 here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, Sunday nighter. We've got the New England Patriots going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens 2.5-point favorites at home. The Patriots with a win can clinch a playoff berth, but they can't clinch the division this week. Drake May's MVP campaign took a hit last week with that loss against the Bills. And now all of a sudden, everybody following that loss is calling the Patriots frauds. And if they lose this game, that conversation is only going to get louder. So to a certain extent, this is a bit of a must-win game for the Patriots, but really it's much more of a must-win game for the Ravens as they are fighting for their playoff lives. I think this is going to be a close, interesting ball game that should tell the story of these two teams as we now head into the home stretch of the regular season. But I like the Patriots more in this matchup, and I'm not all the way sold on Baltimore being back despite that shutout win against a Bengals team who has also given up on football this year. So I'm going to take the 2.5 with the New England Patriots. All right, Monday nighter. We've got the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Niners 6.5-point favorites in this matchup here. And, of course, San Fran with a win will clinch a playoff berth. And the Colts, who were at one point the top seed in the AFC, are now all of a sudden fighting for their playoff lives. Now, look, the 49ers, I think, are the better team, but they are very much on upset alert, and the Colts are a very trendy pick to pull the upset in this game. Old man Phillip Rivers came back to Indianapolis last week, and the Colts were somehow within an eyelash of beating the Seahawks with a really good defense. But I have questions about this 49ers run defense, especially with the league's leading rusher in Jonathan Taylor on the other side, who I think is averaging 153 yards per game. And San Francisco has given up more than 135 yards rushing in each of the past 2 games. And if JT is on it, this game is going to get interesting. I mean, after how Phillip Rivers and the Colts looked last week against Seattle, it makes it really hard to pick against them against the spread. And the Colts might not win this game, but I'm going to take them to cover the 6.5 in this matchup. All right, so my picks this week, I'm going with the Eagles minus 6.5, the Packers minus 1.5, the Vikings minus 2.5, the Bills minus 10.5, the Texans minus 13.5, the Steelers plus 7.5, the Patriots plus 2.5, and the Colts plus 6.5. And folks, next week, because it is Christmas, what I'm going to do, I'm probably going to come on here on Tuesday, and I'm going to pick the 3 Christmas Day games that we have against the spread, and then I'm going to do my regular pick segment on Friday, but it's going to be more of a condensed pick segment. Just going to be short, sweet, and to the point with our picks with the other 2 Saturday games next week. And then, of course, our regular 6 games that we pick against the spread. But anyway, like, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell to be notified of when I post again. And also follow me on Twitter and on Bluesky at CW Talk Sports. That's CWTALKS Sports. And I will see y'all the next time. Peace.